You know, as Jasiri said, we are certainly having a lot more conversation about criminal justice and the equities. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. As Jasiri said, we're certainly having a lot more conversation about inequities in the criminal justice system, and we are hearing a lot from politicians at all levels of government. There may be more talk than action at this point, but it is true that we are at least discussing these issues. So I'd like to start by asking each of you, where do you think the most powerful point of leverage is to make change in the system? As you kind of look at the challenges of in the criminal justice system, where do you believe the biggest difference can be made? Brian, can I start with you?
I would state on the front end, obviously, when we talk about on the state level or when we talk about the legislature or Congress, certainly there's some gridlock there. When you have 253 people that have to reach some kind of consensus, it's oftentimes difficult to have anything advance of any substance. Whereas on the local level, I think a lot of change can be made, and oftentimes the ordinances and policies that are crafted on a local level usually forces the hand of the state legislature as well as Congress. So we've seen that bear itself out even in Philadelphia with its district attorney, Larry Krasner, is really transforming what the traditional role of a district attorney looks like. That can be replicated for any and all elected positions.
Yeah, personally?
Yeah, I think that our biggest leverage point, or where the power really rests, is right here. When we think about politics, politics starts on the street. It starts in your home. Politics starts wherever the issue is. So when we think about how we can really move the 253, or how do we move Congress, people move them. And if we can't move them, then we move them out of their job. That's what our power is. So when we're talking about grassroots, criminal justice, prison abolition, when there is a will on the streets, when the people are saying that enough is enough, that we're not going to continue to stand for the policies as they are now, we can start to move the hands of my colleagues and those of us in positions of what we consider power, because they will move so much more quickly when you guys are outside of their offices, when you guys are at the polls, when you guys are on ballots, when we're running against them, when we're sending messages that their power is temporary, that the perception of their power is temporary, and that realistically they have to answer to us. So I think right here with people is how we're going to ultimately do anything really, but specifically this.
Yeah, Turahn?
Thank you. To piggyback off of Representative Lee, it does begin with the people. And personally, as a candidate for the district attorney's office last month, I think that office now, people realize the power of that office and the importance of that office, and how it's important to have the right people in control of that office. Because during the course of the campaign, I realized people didn't understand the impact of the district attorney's office, what that office does, and how that office impacts all of us. While I'm happy that these conversations are being had, but these issues have been going on for years, and it's only now that everyday citizens are beginning to realize the importance of these elected officials, and particularly the district attorney's office. So I would just hope people will continue to stay engaged and realize how important these offices are and how they impact each and every one of us, whether you're a witness of a crime, whether you're a victim, whether you're an actual defendant. So we just need to be mindful of the people that we put in these positions, because again, they affect all of us.
Well, let me go back to it. I should mention, by the way, that we invited the district attorney or someone from the office to appear today, and no one did. Let me ask you, and even understanding your point about grassroots activism being the key, let's talk about the way each level of government could respond to that activism. When you just said that the DA is, people are starting to understand the impact of the DA's office. What prompted you to run? What are the policies that you think could change and have the biggest impact if they did? And how can that discussion continue even after your defeat?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
It wasn't just one incident that sparked me to run. I've been working in social work. I'm a former prosecutor. I was the chief deputy director of the public defender's office, and I got tired of begging for justice. I got tired of that office not doing the things that they are supposed to do as ministers of justice. So there's no one singular incident that prompted me to run. I just knew that I got to the point in my career as a public defender, there was nothing I could do to change the system. There was nothing that I could do as a public defender that would have systemic change.
So, was your objection essentially individual choices in individual cases, or are there systemic policies that you thought had to be changed?
Definitely. I've been saying for the longest we have to get back to treating people like people because we've gotten away from it. That office is so concerned. Thank you. It's too concerned about convictions and not looking at people as individuals. And the problem that we have when we have people in these offices that don't understand the collateral consequences of criminal convictions, they don't look at people as people. They treat them as dockets, and they don't realize the damage that causes not only the person that's being charged, their families at home, and it just creates more crime, and we don't give people the opportunity to put their mistakes behind them and move forward. We saddle them down with convictions, and then we don't give them the tools to put their lives back together.
Well,
Thank you.
I'll come back to the election. Can I ask you, the state legislature, the state government, you have legislation on, for example, on police use of force. Where are the areas that you think that the state legislature can most have the most effect by intervening, and what really needs to be left at the local level?
Yeah, so actually, I really think there's a lot that we should be doing at the state level. First and foremost, policy. We absolutely need to revisit policy. We need to talk about why certain laws are on the book. So when a police officer can shoot somebody in the back and that's legal, we need to re-examine why it's legal to kill a fleeing suspect who is unarmed and not dangerous. So that's our use of force bill, and that's one bill that I'm proposing. But other things that we can be looking at and things that we are looking at in our legislature, whether we need to bring in a special prosecutor, whether we should have regional...
In cases of police shootings.
In cases of police shootings, police misconduct. Because we also know that the DA works with police officers, and to expect them to then go and work with their friends who they'll need on the next case doesn't really make sense. But also what we do at the state level is we fund prisons. When we think about whether the state has complete jurisdiction over two things, education and police. Right now in Pennsylvania, we're funding our prison. It costs more to fund a prisoner than it does that we're spending on a college student. And we've been cutting college consistently for the last 2-3 decades. So that's our priority. What are we prioritizing in this state? Are we prioritizing building up citizens who are well-rounded, who are educated, and who have the resources, the tools to not even come in contact with the criminal justice system in the first place? Or are we preparing for a state that's bloated with folks who we need to house? So there are a lot of things that we can do, but I think policy and spending and prioritizing are the big ones.
Brandon, talk a little bit about changes that can and should be made at the state level versus what has to happen in local communities.
Well, I'll speak in the context of, Representative Lee talked about grassroots. So it's not only us getting out to vote, but also getting on the ballot as well. And one of the constitutional bars of anyone that's been convicted of either a felony or a crime falsification is that they are prohibited from running and holding public office. And oftentimes the people that are closest to the problem are the best suited to really fix those issues. That's chiefly why the lieutenant governor appointed me to this post, not only because of my public policy background, but who better to really analyze where the inefficiencies lie with the clemency process than someone who went through it as an applicant. So I think the more that we have people that can really provide that insight, I think Turahn had mentioned about a lot of the policymakers and people of influence not treating people as human beings or not being closely impacted or have no experience about the issues that come under their purview. It really does a disservice to the people that the folks are serving. And at the end of the day, just to be perfectly frank, most publicly elected officials, with the exception of Representative Lee here, are lazy. It comes down to that.
We're trying to change that. Stereotypes, don't stereotype us.
Right. And at the end of the day, it's called public service. It's not really meant to be a 9-to-5 job. Don't get into this if you're not willing. There's some sacrifices that need to be made. Certainly I've developed that work ethic. Before I've been in this post, I tried to stay as close to the people as possible. You can still see me in the most seedy bar in the city of Harrisburg, but also in rooms with the governor and also providing some of that insight. So having people, I think, that really have insight to those issues, and getting more people to have the ability to occupy those positions of influence is key. That's something that certainly the Board of Pardons can empower folks
You
with.
mentioned your experience with the clemency process. I think that was your phrase. Not everyone in the audience, I think, is familiar with your story. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now.
Right. So for anyone not familiar with the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons or clemency is the ultimate act of forgiveness from the Commonwealth of anyone who's been convicted of a crime. So I now oversee that agency. Was appointed April 1st of this year by Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. What's unique about me holding this post is, in two respects, is certainly I'm the first, I believe, formally convicted felon to oversee a criminal justice agency, not only probably in the Commonwealth, but maybe nationwide. And part of us understanding what powers, the Lieutenant Governor's office over the last few decades have been looked at as maybe a ceremonious position. So if people don't really know, there's certain powers to the Lieutenant Governor. One huge power is having the unilateral authority to appoint who he wants as secretary, and he utilized that authority to do so. So certainly, I'm striking a fine balance. Certainly, I can empathize with those that have been justice involved, but also understand and am empathetic to those that have been impacted by crime. One of the probably unique relationships I have in this post that really boggles people's mind is I have a great relationship with of Pennsylvania's victim advocate, Jennifer Storm. When I first got appointed, there were a lot of people that went to her and said, "Hey, what do you think about this post?" And she said, "Oh, that's my homie." So having those relationships, I think, and those unconventional, even the Lieutenant Governor for that matter, we often see that storyline on television where there's an ordinary person that occupies a position of great influence. He's one of those people. He's down to earth. He's really trying to push the envelope. And when you have people that don't come from those traditional backgrounds, the more inclined they are to push the envelope and operate outside of the lines, so to speak.
Thank you. Let me ask, Representative, and I'll start with you. I mean, one of the challenges in Pennsylvania, and certainly Allegheny County embodies this as much as anywhere in the state, is a diffusion of responsibility. A lot of municipalities, over 100 police departments in this county, magistrates who are, elected as individuals and have tremendous discretion. Jasiri mentioned there's a lot of interest in the last year about a countywide police review board. There's a lot of uncertainty whether that would, in fact, have any legal jurisdiction over all of these municipalities. Is there a need for the state, and is it possible politically for the state to set more common rules that would apply across all these jurisdictional dividing lines?
So we're definitely going to find out. And when we talk about that package of legislation that we're proposing, one of my colleagues, Representative Jake Wheatley, is proposing a bill that would try to basically form a statewide board or oversight commission where we can set standards, a licensing process. So like any other profession, as a lawyer with a law degree, if I have a misconduct, if I get suspended, you can look me up. Teachers, nurses, anybody else, any professional board, you're able to do that. There is no professional board for policing right now. So I think that's one of the big problems that we see. But also when we look at those small municipalities, East Pittsburgh, Swissvale, which is another municipality where the same police officer was about to be hired, because we have so many, part-time officers who are working in multiple jurisdictions because they can't get full-time work or because it's not professionalized. But these small municipalities have different training standards, they have different resources than bigger jurisdictions, your state troopers, and even your city. So mandating or kind of creating some uniformity is something that I think we need to look at on the state level, but also in terms of creating a database, a statewide database. So if one police officer has a misconduct in one jurisdiction, in one department, he shouldn't be able to just leave, go to another one, and then be let loose on our streets where he may inflict harm on our kids or our residents. So that's something that we want to stop.
Ron, what was your sense of the ability? Is there currently legal jurisdiction for the county, short of state action of the kind representatively, until that happens, what can the county do at this point to establish more uniform standards or expectations for these many police departments? Is there the authority for a countywide police review board?
Like Representative Lee said, I guess we'll find out. I think that it's obviously necessary because there's no uniformity amongst all these municipalities. The police department over here may do something completely different over here. So I think we need these officers, these departments, they need to come together because it's necessary. Like Representative Lee stated, you had Officer Rosefeld who had a history of misconduct with the University of Pittsburgh. There were cases in which he targeted African-American males. He was fired in his very first day on the job. Antoine Rose, the second. So it's imperative. I think that just having these conversations aren't enough. We have to get out there and actually put them in place. That way these things don't happen in the future.
We're coming up on the one-year anniversary of that shooting. You were very critical of the way the DA handled the case. What should have been done differently?
Off top, the officer was allowed to go home to his family. If I commit a criminal homicide, you are to be held without bond. That's the statute. So what kind of message did that send to the community where this officer essentially murdered somebody and they're afforded the opportunity to come home to their family? So it's a different justice system depending on who you are, what you look like, and what you do for a living. And I believe in equal justice across the board for everybody. And the other issue that I took issue with was the fact that no use of force expert was ever called. So that gave the defense instant credibility. You have the Commonwealth put on their case and the defense put on their case, and they offered an expert. So if you're a juror that doesn't have a whole lot of experience or knowledge of the criminal justice system, and you see that the defense attorney puts up an expert to say the things that you should be combating, to me, I believe that the fix was in from the very beginning. I don't believe that office took the steps necessary to effectually prosecute that case.
That's a strong statement. The fix was in from the very beginning.
Well, that's my personal opinion.
Let me ask you this. You provided the first serious challenge in 20 years.
The only challenge.
The only challenge. You got to 40%.
Certainly.
Right? You got to 40%, so you found an audience, but ultimately 60% of the voters went the other way.
Certainly.
What does that say to you about where the community is on the issues you've raised? I mean, and I'm representing in your thoughts too. What does it say to you about where the consensus is now? Does that say to you that most people are in fact satisfied with the way these issues are being handled?
I think 41% is encouraging. A year ago, nobody knew my name, and within a year, I was able to get 41%. Thank you. I had very little resources, no name recognition. I was strictly grassroots, and within a year, I got 41% of Allegheny County's vote. So I think it's encouraging. I think it's something something to build on. And it's a statement that the people of Allegheny County, they're tired of business as usual. Business as usual is why we are where we're at right now, and it doesn't work for me, and it shouldn't work for you.
The challenge in many communities for people who want to who believe the system is inequitable and want reform in the system is you often run into the question, the challenge back that equity and safety are in tension or are incompatible. When you look at the kind of vote that you had here, what does that say to you about the challenge of convincing a majority of the electorate that in fact these things are not necessarily in tension and can be complementary?
Yeah, so actually, I don't know that I read it that way. I mean, if we're looking specifically at Turan's case,
yeah.
When we think about an entire county, Allegheny County is the second biggest county in Pennsylvania. There are a lot of voters, non-voters, folks in the electorate that we need to reach. We need a lot of time to do that. We need a lot of money to do that, and we need another name. We're talking about a guy who had been in office for 20 years, and not just him. His family has power. You know, everything around him is power. So to be able to break into that, to really have real conversations with people about what a DA does, about what our criminal justice system can look like if we participate and engage differently. That's the first step, and it's the important one, because a lot of people don't recognize how hard it is to break into politics, to really, and not just politics, because as Brandon said, we talk a lot about voting, but we don't talk about using politics as a strategy. Our end game shouldn't be we're voting just because it's a cultural thing, because we culturally do it because we're supposed to. But we need to vote to build power for our communities, and doing that means that we need to educate people. That means that we need resources to spread our messages to folks. And when we're talking about equity, when we're talking about marginalized communities and impacted communities and getting them into spaces, that's breaking molds. That's saying that the people who we traditionally see as our leaders, maybe we should revisit that. Maybe we should see ourselves as our leaders. Maybe we should think about giving our ideas, giving our vision equal weight with the weight that we do our oppressor, with the weight that we do people who have traditionally wielded power.
So what is the lesson that you take from the result? Just that you need to keep going in the same direction?
I say that the writing's on the wall. I looked at those results that day and I saw the writing on the wall. And I think everybody in Allegheny County, and I think the current folk in office right now recognize that Allegheny County is changing. So, and it wasn't just Turahnn's situation, and we didn't cross the finish line yet on that one, yet. Oh, but we will, and it's coming. But also we had. Amen. Yeah, but we also didn't just have Turahn running. We had women running for county council, women who were running about reforming our prison, Allegheny County prison, jail. Those women, one woman who was impacted, who was also formerly incarcerated, who came in and they did win, and they did get across the line. And we were able to do that by chipping away, by expanding the electorate, by including people who are impacted, by empowering them. So we've been seeing tremendous victories across Allegheny County, and they've all been criminal justice reform based.
Thank you. What is the relationship between, is there a relationship between providing more opportunity for kind of reintegration into the economy and society for the formerly incarcerated and public safety? Can you make the case to someone who says, look, I don't, who is kind of looking at this and saying, it doesn't affect me one way or the other, I just want me and my family safe. Can you make the case to them that providing more opportunity also creates more safety?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have to make the case. The numbers make the case for themselves. One of the big stats is that 95% of those that are incarcerated will be returning back to our communities. That is a fact. That is not a Brandon fact. That is not a Lieutenant Governor fact. That's a fact. So the fact of the matter is that folks that are incarcerated, the vast majority of them will be coming back to our communities. If you have someone coming back where they feel as if they are occupying a second class, a status, and opportunities are blocked off to them, of course, folks become desperate when you don't have any opportunities or you feel marginalized. So I would say that's key, number one. And then also when it comes to restoring civil rights, one of the things that a pardon does is it does restore some civil rights. I mentioned earlier about the ability to run and hold office, but one of the other important, and that was mentioned, one of the other important civil rights that are restored is the ability to serve as a juror. I know a lot of people, historically have been trying to get out of jury duty, but I think
we know better now.
Yeah. As Representative Lee said, we know better now, and I think people look at that as an honor, and especially if you've ever been impacted. So, we mentioned about the Antwan Rose case, and although there was a black juror on I don't know how many it was, but I know one black juror from Harrisburg that I actually know personally. I know his background, and really he wasn't someone that could identify with Antwan Rose, just to be frank, whereas someone like myself, I could. I've been in that situation, and now I have the luxury of being, having received a pardon and now being eligible to serve as a juror as well. So I think if people can take advantage of this, can participate in the democratic process all around the board, whether it's voting, serving as a juror, running as a candidate, the more inclined, they feel more part of the fabric of their community and more inclined they are to stay on a straight and narrow and contribute to that community as opposed to take away from it. So, like I said, the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah. All right, let's bring in the audience if we have some questions. Let's see, we got one over here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Karen Lightman. I'm a Pittsburgh resident, and I also work at Carnegie Mellon University. And first and foremost, I want to thank you. And thank the Atlantic. I've been a Pittsburgh resident for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this before, and I'm heartened by the discussions that we're having. But my question is about gun control. Somebody who's on the no-fly list now in the United States can buy a gun, has access to guns. A lot of the things that are happening involve guns. Can we talk about gun control here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the city has tried to act on it as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, the city has, or is in process of upholding their ban. I do want to talk about that. And I talk about gun control a lot because it is the hot topic. Absolutely, we need stricter regulations. Certain folks should obviously not be able to buy a gun, and no one should be able to buy it as easily as we do. But I do want to say, when we think about community violence, and I know that Jasiri talked a lot about community violence, that's not going to be solved by assault rifles bans or gun control in general, because we're talking about violence that is caused because of a lack of resources, because of poverty. So we actually really need to talk about resources. When we talk about safety and equity, and that brings back to safety and equity, we don't make our streets safer by being tougher on crime. We make it safer by addressing the root causes of crime. So instead of gun control, and I want to be quickly, instead of gun control, we need to talk about investing in education. We need to talk about transportation. We need to talk about environmental justice. We need to talk about making sure that our kids have somewhere to go in the summertime, somewhere to go at night, making sure that they have safe places and ways to express themselves, that we're reinvesting in the arts, that we're making sure that that people have job opportunities. Because I bet people in certain communities would not go to selling drugs or to other type of careers that are very dangerous if they had the opportunity to make a wage that will sustain their families. So gun control. So gun control is one very important piece, and I don't want to negate that, but I do want to say that if we are not having that conversation at the same time that we're having a conversation around resources, around equity, then we're not looking at the whole puzzle.
You know, we go to a lot of different cities and do events like this, and the one number that I always look at in every city is the share of kids from different racial groups who attend schools where a majority of their classmates are poor or low income. Because it is a critical measure of kind of economic and racial and social isolation. And in Pittsburgh, I believe the number is 80% of African American kids attend schools where a majority of their classmates qualify as poor or low income. For white kids, it's 22%. And you know, it raises the question of, once you are dealing with that level of economic isolation, how much are you going to get the kind of criminal justice outcomes that and educational disparities and income disparities?
They're cyclical. It's a cyclical thing that we're looking at right now, because not only are these communities, not only you're more likely to go to a school with low-income students, but you're also in insular communities.
Yeah.
So these are communities that are more likely to be a food desert, to be a medical desert, to have transportation issues, a dearth of career opportunities. So we're literally trapping poor kids in communities that they cannot escape. And then we're leaving them basically in cages and saying, fend for yourselves, and we're surprised that there's violence and crime.
And I was going to say, to what extent, I mean, this is a city that in a lot of, by a lot of measures, I first came here in 1979. I've been here, I've watched it go down and watched it come back. I mean, there's a lot of job creation. There's a lot of, this, where we are, to what extent has that created opportunity? Irradiated into the kind of communities that we're talking about, the kind of kids? Or has it in any way broadened opportunity for the people that you represent, or that we're talking about?
I'm not sure.
To what extent is the city's economic boom
It's not
revival?
I mean, that's trickle-down economics. We talk about Mon Valley and the economy of the Mon Valley. It's not tech. It's not the UPMC Medical Center. UPMC left the Mon Valley. It's not any of these kind of careers that are very trendy, that attract a very specific type of transient folk who come for colleges, who come into our city. None of that is making it to the Mon Valley. None of that is making it to predominantly black, poor, or brown communities. And then also, when we think about our education system, we're also not prepared for them. Our school systems are failing. Our school systems aren't preparing us to even go into colleges, go into the sorts of careers that are being created here in Pittsburgh. So there is a huge barrier between our communities and those jobs.
Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, real quick. I just want to pivot back to the gun control question. So one of the things that I intend to do in this role, and one of the other civil rights that are restored with a pardon, is the ability to purchase and possess a firearm. I don't know what the demographics nationwide are on black gun ownership, but I think if you have more black and brown people lawful gun owners, who certainly can serve as lobbyists, if you will. I think you would have the NRA would be more inclined to ensure that folks can stockpile. So that's one way that we look to restore affording people the opportunity to lawfully own firearms, particularly black and brown people, I think will kind of, as a byproduct, address the
I'm using
gun
that same
controls.
tactic.
I've not heard that argument
To me.
before. We have a question over here.
First off, I'd like to thank you for having this discussion. I agree with Carnegie Mellon. We need to have more of these. This is really good to hear this, and the food was great. Enjoyed eating breakfast. But the question the thing that I want to discuss, and it was brought up earlier too, was the bail. The difference between a police officer who committed homicide being able to go home, and other people who commit a crime can't get out of jail because they can't pay their bail. And I even worked in the Homestead Police Station. I was a domestic violence officer, and I saw some of the things that the police go through. And it's a burnout job in many ways. I've seen that. But the thing with the bail is that I was unaware that when you pay a bail bondsman, like you get $50,000 bond, you have to come up with $2,500, and he'll cover the other $2,500 because that's a $5,000 bail. But you don't get your money back. And even if you're innocent, you don't get your money back. Right. Whatever you paid that bail bondsman, you're not going to get back, is what the bail bondsman said. You don't get it back. So if you put up $2,500 for a $50,000 bail, and you're declared innocent, you're still out $2,500, lawyer fees, I don't know what all. So I'd like to discuss that. And is that at the state level or the local level that we address that? Turahn. And one more point about bail. I read about a mentally ill, and that's what I saw a lot of the police. They dealt.
We got to get to the question. So.
And she was mentally ill, and she shoplifted something minor, really minor. They put her in jail, and she had a $300 bond. No family member came forward to help her out, and so on. And I believe she was in jail for 6 months, and she ended up dying in jail.
Wow.
And then there's just one other thing that I want to talk
No,
about.
let's go. No, we got to go. We got to go. We got to go.
I'm the site director for.
Then yeah, we got to go.
Another thing.
Turahn, talk about bail.
I'll be quick. I think we need to eliminate cash bail because it's fundamentally unfair. You have two people that are similarly situated. Right.
Yeah.
I know people say that life isn't fair, but it's not fair. You have two people similarly situated, charged with the same things, different backgrounds. One person has the money to pay, the other person doesn't. So that person stays even though you're innocent until proven guilty. We say that, but we don't treat people that way.
And that can be done at the county level, or that can be done at the state level?
County.
County can do it.
Correct.
What about the state? The state can it set rules on bail?
The state can pass any bill we want.
But that's not part of the discussion now.
It's not, but I think that at the county level is something that we can look at because even at the district judges and the DA capacities, those are really our entry points to eliminating cash bail.
All right. Listen, join me in thanking this terrific panel.